Okay, so for this level of complexity, we're going to add in two more little pieces. The first is on our relationships. So we already know that relationships are associations between entities. Before we were drawing them with just a simple line and then adding in the cardinalities and then determining whether they can be just by themselves, zero, they could be one or many, right? Now we're just going to add in one more extra little feature, which is adding in a diamond to represent the verb, basically. So instead of just having department with a line to employee with symbols depicting the one to many or many to many or whatever's going on, we're going to add a little diamond in there that says works in. Now this is such a little piece. Why didn't we add it before? Simply because in the enterprise diagrams, they often don't bother having them. So that's the reason why we're adding this in now at this later stage. All right, so now that we have this, we can add in one level of complexity on our entity types. So we already know that entities are tables and that usually they are standalone, like this is what we have. But sometimes we have things like dependents that rely on other information being there. The difference between those are strong entities and weak entities. So strong entities are like employee. They're standalone, they don't depend on anything else at all. They have their own primary key. A weak entity is something like dependents, where if an employee leaves the company, the data for the dependents would be deleted. They would disappear, basically, right? So without any employees, we don't have any dependents. So the way that you can tell that something is a weak entity visually is that we get a double line around both the entity itself, dependent, and the relationship. So you'll see both the double lines there. And when you look at the actual entities for dependent, you'll see that dependent will have what's called a foreign key. So it'll have an identifier from the employee to the, like the employee ID will be listed on the dependent. It's usually combined with something like dependent's name to create a unique identifier that's kind of a compound identifier that's specifically for the dependent. So if the employee's ID number is 5273, then the dependent's ID number might be 5273-John. And that would be the identifier of the dependent named John that is associated with the employee. So you should be able to visually separate out these and draw them out separately. For the entity types, you should be able to add in the extra rectangle, and you should be able to both add in the attributes by reading a set of business rules, so the little paragraph, and you should be able to draw in the attributes and then identify which ones might be compounds, adding in, like splitting out the names. You should be able to look and see whether something should be dashed because it's derived, or add in the derived values. You should be able to look at an attribute, see the double lines, and understand what that means, or recognize, oh, this is probably a multi-valued, possibly multi-valued attribute. I should add in those double lines. So those are the skills that you should have by the time you finish this point.